Yes, I'm from Alabama. I was born near Clanton, Alabama, which is the county seat of Chilton County. I was about 12 miles in a little place called Cane Creek. It was so small that you walked through it before you realized you were there.
Good peaches down there too.
Oh yes, 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 very good.
I just had some recently.
Yeah.
Chilton County peaches.
Alabama was mostly, before World War II, was mostly cotton and those crops. During World War II is when Alabama started putting in peaches. North Carolina was the state that was known for peaches before Alabama started putting in peaches. But
I didn't know that.
during the World War II is when they started growing peaches, and now they are quite a peach grower.
I'm going to move this over just a little bit. But you can just look at me. Don't look at the camera.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's still rolling. So I read your book, which was fantastic and a good read. Just finished it last week. And, but thank you for writing it. So I know the answer to a lot of these questions probably from the book, but
Yeah.
When did you enter the service?
November in 1940. Oh boy, I think it was January 1940.
And
Sometimes these things escape my memory.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But you were a medic. How did that start out or happen?
I worked for a veterinarian, Dr. Parrish, in Clanton, Alabama, during the summer. And my job was to inoculate dogs for rabies. And I would put up signs that I would be doing that job on Saturdays so the farmers and people that had dogs could bring them in without interrupting their work schedule. And they would have to bring them there and pay 50 cents to get the vaccination for rabies. If they didn't do that, we'd have to take the dog and they'd build a fence around the jail in Clanton. We call that the compound. And we would put the dogs in there until they paid the 50 cents to get them inoculated. And of course, while they were there, they had to be fed and watered all the time. So they had to pay an extra 50 cents. So that time it would cost them $1. I was licensed to carry a pistol, which I carried in a shoulder holster, and also a badge, because going out into the country, some of the farmers didn't look very light on the fact that you either going to take their dog or they had to pay if you get the dog done. So when I was ready to go enlist in the service, the recruiting sergeant asked me what I'd been doing. I told him I'd been working with Dr. Parrish, a veterinarian, and he said, "We'll put you in the medics." So that's how I went from vaccinating dogs to vaccinating dog faces. Soldiers were called dog faces. So that's how I went into medics.
That's really interesting. So you went to basic training where?
I went to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, and after that we did a lot of moving around with the 1st Division and 60. I was in the 16th Infantry, 2nd Battalion, and we traveled by convoy from down to Texas and Louisiana on maneuvers, and from there we went to Maine, up on the St. Lawrence River, and did maneuvers up there. After that, we went to Fort Devon, Massachusetts, and while I was there, I was picked to go to medical school in Colorado to Fitzsimmons General Hospital. And I went there, and I took a course, extended course there in surgery, and which meant I had to learn how to reset bones, knowing the different layers of skin, how to suture and all sort of thing. And after I came back from there, I came back to my unit. Yeah.
Did you feel pretty competent after that course to do that in battle?
Yes, I did. One of the things in battle, of course, is strictly first aid. It's very important to keep the patient, or casualty as we call them, from going into shock. Once a patient goes into shock, you can lose them. So we were doing patch-up work. Unfortunately, some of the guys would have their arms or legs just hanging by a little skin. In order to transport them, we had to take that leg off. So we'd have to tie off the vein, arteries, and so forth, and then put a bandage on them that hopefully would work, get them in an ambulance or a Jeep and get them back as quick as possible to hospital. They would go from us to collecting stations and then go back to hospital. So we saved many guys like that. Other wounds could be machine gun bullets wounds that would go, sometimes go right through the body, and you'd have to penetrate around that sometime with a scaffold to try to tie off there. Bayonet wounds were stomach wounds are very difficult to handle, because you had to, if a guy was cut across his stomach, you had to repack that. You had to put in packing to hold his stomach in and bandage that, and you give them some morphine or something, give them a shot, get them back. Other wounds on the front line were, of course, bayonet cuts, fragmentation wounds, which are more difficult than bullets. They get tears more. And so we were doing strictly first aid, and my job was trying to, I had to do, where we did have to do surgery and patch up something, we'd do that, but very little stitching on the front lines, because you would want to, some wounds, you would want to stitch while they were fresh, if you want to call it fresh, while they were fresh, because once they start healing together, it's too late sometimes to stitch properly. But we were strictly first aid. We were in machine gun distance of the front line, and had the aid station hit by 88 millimeters or artillery a number of times. And some of our guys, aid station guys, were killed from that.
How many medics were assigned to you or with you?
We had depended a lot on the battle, the type of battle. I had 27 and I had 2 doctors. The doctors were doctors at that time brought in. Some were not military. And so it was up to each battalion sergeant. We had the 1st, 2nd, 3rd battalions in the regiment. And each battalion, the men were headed up by a staff sergeant. And that was my job. And we were to take care of the men, assign them into different jobs, and make sure supplies were there, just overseeing all that sort of thing. Because the doctors were busy with their jobs too, doing their job in the aid station. So we had, I had to assign men to each company as company aid men. Those men lived with the company, the infantry company, and so that they'd get to know the members of that company. And then we had the litter bearers, had the guys assigned as litter bearers. And then also we rotated the men in the aid station. They would be working day and night. We had an oil lamp that we used then, and we had 2 medical chests set up with a stretcher across those. That was our operating table. And we had our we sterilized with alcohol. We have an alcohol tray, and once you use the instrument, you'd hand those to a guy, and he'd clean them up the best he could and put them in the alcohol tray. And we used them over and over again. Had a guy that sharpened the needles that we used, and we used syringes over and over again at that time. And so it was really, when I think back how we able to do that, and sometime we'd have as many as 80 guys that were wounded in 1 hour. And trying to take care of those guys and get them sent back was quite a job.
Yeah, thinking back on it, you wonder how you did it.
Yeah.
You did what you were trained to do.
That's what we were trained to do, and we were good at it. We saved many, many lives.
So you started, well, you first went to North Africa?
Our first invasion was North Africa at Oran. Actually, Arzu, right out very near Oran. We made a landing at Arzu in North Africa. Yeah.
And how long was the fighting going on there before you went elsewhere?
Probably the better part of a year, as I remember. It's funny because sometimes my mind is clicked on everything on a date, but lately I've been involved in so many things that are going on about D-Day that it just
kind of runs together.
Yeah, but I was probably about a year in Africa.
And then you went to Sicily?
Sicily, yeah. We invaded Sicily at Gilan, and that was much harder, I guess the word to use, than Africa. We were faced by 28 German Panzer tanks that shaped like a horseshoe around the beach, and we were coming in the beach, and they were sitting about half a mile in front of us, and we could see them, and we could, of course, hear the firing coming in at us. And we had not, at that time, had any anti-tank guns unloaded. And the soldiers, the infantry, were fighting the tanks with their rifles and what we call sticky bomb.
Mm-hmm.
They had dynamite in patches they could stick it on the side of a tank and blow it. And they were even crawling up on the tank who was firing machine guns at them, get up there and trying to pry open the hatch.
Wow.
And drop hand grenades in there. And I never saw guys fight so hard and so just brave stuff that they were doing, fighting those tanks. The battleships knocked out several of the tanks, and the tanks turned and moved back. And the only thing that saved us from being pushed back in the ocean at that time was they didn't have foot soldiers supporting the tanks.
That's
Something
why I
that
was wondering, how did you guys get close enough to the tanks to?
just keep moving it forward.
So
moving,
they didn't have
running. We are, as the medics were, we were evacuating wounded as fast as we could. And you just run, the guys would run zagged runs, and there was nothing too much to get behind there. So they just went at them, you know, and that's the way you have to do is with this machine gun, whatever it was, you just had to go into it.
But if they had more foot soldiers, it would
If
have
they
been
had,
harder.
right after they pulled back, after the battleships were fighting the tanks and they pulled back, they brought 50 loads of foot soldiers in there. Had they had the 50 loads of foot soldiers while the tanks were there, the foot soldiers would have been moving forward against us too. And I don't know what the results have been, but the 16th Infantry and the whole infantry regiment was really a tough bunch of guys, and we fought some terrible battles and won. And the guys were not afraid to tackle anything, go after.
That's amazing. Where do you think was the toughest? There in Sicily or?
Troina.
Oh, okay.
City of Troina was the toughest one. It was built on ledges, big boulders and rocks. And the Germans, we fought day and night there. We took Sicily in 31 days. We'd go a week without pulling our shoes off or clothes, just keep moving forward all the time, sleeping when we could, and no meal times. You just eat when you get a chance. Troina was the last big stand of the Germans, and they pulled most of their high-ranking officers out of Sicily at that time, got them to cross over into Italy, and turned that battle over to the non-commissioned officers. And they were good. They put up a battle there. They used their mind, their men well, and we lost a lot of men there. There was hand-to-hand fighting, and it was that was the fierce battle, I guess, one of the worst. Yeah. So that was Troina. Yeah.
So about 31 days on Sicily, plus any extra time there, or did you go back to England?
We spent just a few, we spent about 2 weeks there, kind of reorganizing, and we had guys that had a trench foot that had to be taken care of, because when they made the invasion, everyone got wet. It was 5 days before they could pull off their shoes or change their socks. And that continued on through, because we couldn't call them in, they were fighting, so we couldn't get them in. So many of them had sore feet and athlete's foot. So we didn't have really anything like they have today to treat athlete foot. So Dr. Morshan and I were trying to figure some way that we could cure their feet. We knew we needed a drying agent, and we knew we needed something to kind of help the pain. So all we had that we could come up with was, we had plenty of aspirin, so we crushed up aspirin in alcohol. And we made a liquid for them to wash their feet in, and they do that every day for about a week, and it cured their feet, dried it up and cured it, gave them a little relief. So that was Dr. Morshan and I came up with that idea. Then after that, we had some guys that were just completely exhausted and need some rest. And after that, we went to Harbor, Savannah, not Georgia, but Savannah in Sicily. And we went shipped back to Algiers. And we sailed out of Algiers to England. Yeah.
That's exhausting just to hear about it.
Yeah, it was. And the food it was a British ship, and the food on the ship was not very good, but we'd been used to eating out of cans, and we had one ration. It was a D ration. It was chocolate, very rich chocolate. It was about that square. It had scored in 4 different places. And you could break off a piece for breakfast and a piece for lunch or any other time. That was your daily ration. Chocolate. So you drink some water with that. Very, very rich chocolate. So on the ship that we were going from Savannah back to Algiers, there was an awful smell on it. And we couldn't find what that smell was for a while. Then every time we'd go on a ship, the medics have to set up sick bay for our men, take care of our own men. So near where we set up the sick bay, it was this awful smell. So our regimental surgeon said to me and one of the other sergeants, medics, they were on, all battalions were on there, to find out what that was. So we kept looking around. We went down right outside the boiler room, or the engine room on there was a space probably about a little larger than this room. And that smell was awful there. We looked in, and what they'd been feeding the troops on there was rabbit. And they had brought live rabbits on that ship in crates. And when they killed them, they would skin them and hang the skins up in that area. And when they dry, then when they get back to England, they'd take the skins out and I guess sell them. I don't know what they did. But that's what this smell was. In there, and it almost turned everyone, I guess, their meals on there after that. But of course, in World War II, rabbit was about the only thing you could get in England other than fish. Rations were so strict there going to the military. Children got about an ounce of meat a week, and they had these little ferrets, they called little animals. And the farmers would take those, they'd run their rabbits out of the holes and tunnels where they were. And they would kill the rabbits, and they had little carts, 2-wheel carts, some 4. And they'd hang the rabbits up after they had gutted them and everything, but not skinned them. And they'd hang them up on those carts and push them up the street and sell them. Restaurants would buy them and families would buy those. That was mostly the meat they had.
Like rabbit stew.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell just a little bit about the landing in at Normandy?
Well, we had done, got replacements in England and trained those guys. We've got them in shape. We were doing 50-mile marches over there with full packs, and you go out 25 miles back. That's part of our training. And we got to report that we were trained in better shape than any athlete, regardless of what they were. We were in better shape. And I've read that in some of the history books. And so we were in good shape, and we loaded these ships in Weymouth. There on the 5th, the landing originally was to be on the 5th, and the weather was not good at all. So we stayed on the ship that night, and we were on the Henrico, and so at night they fed us a meal on there of a sort, and the guys were kidding. Those that had made the other invasions were kidding about the Last Supper. This is the Last Supper, and 3 strikes you're out, and all that kind of stuff. And that's the sign, that was a sign to me that the guys were nervous. And because soldiers, when they get nervous, they try to, yes, my doctor, he swims 2 miles out there, see him? Look out the lake.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that you'll have to, oh, I forgot we doing a video.
Okay.
Anyway, he's swimming 2 miles to work.
Every day? Or?
Most times, yeah. So anyway, we stayed on the ship that night, and guys were writing last letters home, and some were playing cards. There's very little space to play cards because there was so many people on this ship that it was just standing room practically only. No one slept that night, I'm sure. So we, the next morning, the convoy traveled that night. They had the minesweepers and destroyers that were traveling with us. And we anchored that night, probably early morning, before daylight, of course, 10 miles off the coast. And while we were anchored there, I went up on deck just as it got daylight and looked out, and I've never seen so many ships in my life. I think there was over 5,000 ships there, battleships and everything else. So my brother was up there, so I saw him, and we chatted a bit about the other invasion, this being our 3rd, and what our parents would be thinking if they knew where we were, and they agreed if one of us was killed, the other one would take care of their family. And then they called for time to go down the nets, to go to stations and go down the net. So I checked all my men's equipment, checked theirs, make sure they had the life preservers on, and talked to each one as they come up. I was up at the station and asked them how they were, are you okay, and all that kind of stuff. And every man that I spoke to like that said, I'm ready. And so the company men went down with the infantry and their boats, and they were getting the waves, so many boats in each wave, as we called it, going in. At that time, the waves in the water in the channel was about 5 feet or so high, quite rough, and as going down the nets to get in the Higgins boat, you had to be careful because the boat was beating against the side of the ship. They had 2 guys usually in the Higgins boat were hanging on to the net to try to stabilize that a bit. That didn't do too much. So when you get down, you had to jump just at the right time to get in, catch the boat at the right space, otherwise you could break your leg. So anyway, I had 7 men with me, and our job was to get in, and on the stand tables that we looked at, it would have been nice to set up an aid station, but it was impossible to set up an aid station on the beach at that time. So we loaded the boats, and everyone got seasick because of the smell of the diesel and the rendezvous, as they call it, waiting for the waves to all load. Almost every man on the boat was seasick, and if you didn't get seasick from the waves and the diesel smell, every guys were throwing up. The wind was blowing that back all over everyone, so you could get sick from that. When we got in, the battleships were firing at that time, firing onto the beach. And when we got in, where we could see the beach, and the machine guns firing at us, and the other shells landing in there, the battleships had to raise their guns so they'd fire over the hill.
What did it sound like
It was
when all that was going on?
it was probably the worst electrical and thunderstorm you ever heard in your life, 10 times worse than that.
And just constant.
And you'd have the flashes of guns and the constant sound of bullets flying by you. And as we got in closer to the shore, machine gun bullets were hitting the ramp on the boat, just like hail. And that when we were getting off the boat, the water was just being pumped up with bullets all around you. And so we had to go into that. And it was, I had told my men, those that had been with me in the other 2 invasions, which they knew to go underwater as far as you could to try to avoid being hit with those bullets. But the new men, I had told them, and I reminded them before we got off the boat, try to go underwater. But that didn't work there because they had barbed wire under the water and mines, had underwater mines. So if you set one of those off, or you get tangled in the barbed wire, you're in trouble, which a lot did. So I went off. I got a bullet right through my, I didn't say a bullet, it was something went right through my right elbow. And I started bleeding pretty bad, but I didn't pay much attention to that. I could still work with it. And so I started, when I got off, getting guys that were drowning and moving forward with them to get them up, hopefully where they could join their infantry companies and get off the beach, move forward. Because our job was strictly that, to save lives and move the infantry off that beach as quick as we could, because everyone was getting killed. And so we were all working together there to save the guys and get them. It was about the I think roughly about the length of a football field that we had to move with no protection of any kind to get up to. There's a little wall up there, was a little rock wall there before a little road running past that. So we were trying to get those guys, and they had to go through the barbed wire, and then they had, the Germans had a tank trap, which was water dug about 4 feet deep with barbed wire and mines in front of that. That was to trap the tanks. If they got up, they'd get down in there. So our guys had to get through that. They had to blow up the barbed wire with bandoliers. They slip pipe under there and blow them up. And we were looking right at the one machine gun on the east of it and one on the west, plus the pillboxes that the Germans had machine guns in those, and also the big guns were firing down the beach at us. So that's what we saw. We got in.
So, do you remember about how long you were, from the time you got off the Higgins boat to?
About two, each wave took about 20 minutes or a little better sometime for each wave to come in and land from out. And I remember when the third wave came in, I'd been wounded in the left thigh. It took a part of my thigh, beat up in the left thigh. That was bothering me quite a lot, but I was still going in the water, getting guys out and dragging guys out, going to guys that were floating to see if they're dead alive. If they were alive, try to save them. If they're dead, just have to leave them. And so we judged by that probably about 2 hours or so that I was working in that. And some of my clothes I had on had bullet holes in them. And after when the regimental medics came in on the third wave, so they were supposed to assist us on Omaha Beach, Easy Red, but they couldn't land. Firepower was so bad that they landed east of us a bit. And they went to what they called Exit 1. That was a road that led off the beach. That was east of us, so firepower wasn't quite as bad there as it was on Omaha Beach. So when I saw them come in, we had been that rock, the concrete there, we'll call it raised rock, is the only thing that I'd been able to see on that beach. The Germans cut down all foliage and everything on the side of that hill. They had a clear view, just as clear as we have at the lake. But that one piece of rock, as we thought it was, stood out there. And I'd told Myers, one of our guys, first I tried to tell Ray Lambert, and he got killed. A bullet went through his head. And then I told Myers, which was a company aid man, but still on the beach, to let's try to get all the men we could that were wounded over behind that big rock. And we did. We got quite a few there. And once the regimental came on and they were able to go where the firepower wasn't too much, they were kind of setting up a makeshift aid station, which was no tent or anything. It was just right out in the open. So then the walking wounded, we sent them in that direction. They could go down to where they were. So after that, for a while, I was still helping guys, and I went in. I don't know whether it was a boat come in on the fourth wave or one that was late coming in on the third wave, but I'd gone in to get a guy that was drowning. He was hung up in the barbed wire. And I went under, and first time I went under, I couldn't get him loose from the barbed wire. So I came up and got a little air, and then I went under again. And it was this life preserver that was tangled up in the barbed wire. So I unbuckled it and got him out. And as I was taking it, I turned to get him out of there. We're in about 4 feet of water, I think. Maybe a little less than that, but when that boat came in, dropped his rail, it hit me right in the back and pushed me right to the bottom. I had the other guy in my bad arm hanging on to him, and I never did let go of it. And that's when I asked God to give me the strength and let me save one more man, the guy I had. And I thought I was a goner. And so that ramp on that boat went up. And it could have gone up because the firepower was so severe that they figured they were all going to get killed. Or it could have been in the wrong slot and they wanted to move it. But so no one knows. But I think, as far as I'm concerned, God answered me that time. Yeah. And after that, of course, I took the guy, crawled out of there, and got up to where a couple of my men were, and I passed out. That was it.
Next thing you know, you're back
on a boat going back to England. Yeah, yeah. And not often I ever tell what happened after that. It was just going back hospital in England.
Yeah.
And I was over there for 6 or 7 months, and
wow.
They were trying to have me in a cast for a while, and they asked me to start we're in the 110th 110th General Hospital, I think it was. It was a old British hospital, Army hospital, staffed with American nurses and doctors. And when I got to where I could walk with a walker, they asked me to organize a rehabilitation company, which was the 110th Rehabilitation Company. And I was acting first sergeant in that company, and did that till I went back to the States, and then I was in the hospital in Halloween General Hospital in New York. From there I went to the Finney General Hospital in Thomasville, Georgia. From there I went to the Wells Convalescent Hospital in Daytona, Florida. And in all, I was about a year before I got out.
That's a remarkable story. And
so that's the way it was.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Very welcome.
I know it's not the first time or won't be the last time you share it, but
I've done it probably 25 times in the last couple of months or more.
Well, you do it not only, a credit to yourself, but to all those other guys you served with.
One of the things that all the things that I've done recently, I hope that the people, the younger generation that sees these and hears these things, realize that the freedom they have today, as we always say, is not free.
Right.
Many guys died so that they could have the freedom they have today. And they should make good use of that freedom. Do something in their life. Don't ever think of burning the flag or disgracing this great country, because those guys are out there that never had families like they can have today, never had the enjoyment of things that they can have today. And they should get a mindset, in many cases different than they have today, and not expect everything to be given to them. Be willing to work for it and work for the freedom of this country. And I hope those things, maybe that someone do that.
Yeah. Great advice. Great wisdom too. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.